Hi again, gang. As you know, our first two papers were based on personal experience and focused on concrete details. Paper one was written in a somewhat informal style and expressed our feelings, while paper two was written as a formal academic paper using high style and maintaining objectivity. We're going to build on those skills in paper three by incorporating research. In fact, paper three will be completely research driven, meaning that all information in it should be taken from expert sources that we will find by using research skills. Now, in many ways, paper three is the most important paper we will write because the skills we learn while working on paper three are those you will need to be able to write papers for most other college courses, including research papers and term papers. In working on papers one and two, we learned the most basic skills of college writing, but those papers really only led up to this all important assignment. Students are required to take this course before taking courses that require research papers, specifically to learn the skills taught while we work on paper three. So it's very important that you use these skills and submit an initial submission draft for paper three. And I urge you to work to revise that paper for portfolio to sharpen your skills. This is the most challenging and most important unit of the course. This unit is, in fact, the meat of the course. Make sure you study all of the materials provided while working on paper three and take careful notes. You will need all of the information studied while working on this paper in courses that require research papers. Let's take a look at some of the most important aspects of paper three that will help us prepare to write formal academic papers for other courses. In working on and writing paper three, we will continue to improve skills we learned while working on papers one and two. We will expand our use of concrete details by using details taken from expert sources, and we will use analysis in studying those sources and determining the appropriate information needed to support our thesis. We will continue to sharpen our skills at maintaining objectivity by avoiding discussing our beliefs or preferences and by writing a formal academic paper in high style. While working on paper three, we will devote considerable time to learning how to locate sources and evaluate them to determine if those sources would be respected by our audience. As we shall learn, not all sources are created equal. If the sources we use to provide information for research papers are not respected by our readers will not believe the points we make in our papers. As you progress through college, your knowledge of the type of sources respected by educated readers will improve. You also will most likely find that you will become more selective in what you read and believe. While the web provides a great free marketplace of ideas, it also has provided a way to publish information that is not reliable, is biased, or is just out and out false. Now, there's some really good stuff on the web, but a lot of what is published on the web is junk. Learning to judge the reliability of information is an important part of critical thinking, and it is a skill that is valuable in all aspects of life while we are students and after we leave college. In working on any college research paper, the best resource for reliable information is the college library. The reputation of college libraries rests on their consistency in providing reliable research sources. While I don't require it, it is best to use sources for paper three that you locate through the CSN library database. Not only will those sources be respected by your readers, but you can use them without conducting additional research to determine the reliability of the author. Working with sources from the library will save you a great deal of time in evaluating sources and determining if they are appropriate and reliable. So if you conduct your research using the CSN library, you will actually save yourself a great deal of time and work. Now, you may use websites located through standard search engines such as Google and Yahoo for your paper. However, before using them, you must conduct research to determine if the information is written and published by experts and that the writers and publishers are who they claim to be. Remember that because websites do not necessarily go through an editing process, there would be nothing to prevent me from posting a page in which I claim to be a geologist from Yale and then post completely made up data proving that gravity doesn't exist. There are certain types of sites, though, that are not appropriate for Paper 3 and are not accepted by professors of most courses. Those include Wikipedia, social media sites, and most personal blogs, personal websites, and email. It's important to note that Paper 3 and most college papers are research-driven. In other words, writers conduct research into a topic before deciding on a point to make in the paper. They do not decide to write a paper to make some preconceived point and then look for sources that support that point. The research drives the paper and leads the writer to the point that the paper should make. We must conduct a great deal of research before we begin to decide what we want to say and what point we want our paper to make. Remember, we're reporting what experts have found to be true, not what we personally believe, and we can't know what experts have found to be true before we conduct research. Everything we state in Paper 3 will be supported by information from sources. Except for the introduction and conclusion and optional transitional paragraphs, every paragraph will be developed with information from reliable expert sources, and we will use MLA in-text documentation to cite the sources that provide that information. Therefore, every paragraph except the introduction, conclusion, and optional transition paragraphs will have at least one MLA citation. If we use more than one source to develop a paragraph, as we often will if we integrate source materials well, some paragraphs will have more than one MLA in-text citation. As we've already discussed briefly, and will discuss in a great deal of depth while working on Paper 3, we will use MLA documentation to give sources credit for the ideas discussed in our paper. Note that we are giving credit for the ideas, not just the wording. So all material taken from sources must be accompanied by in-text citations, and all sources cited in the text of the paper must be appropriately listed on the bibliography, which in MLA is called the works cited page. Using in-text citations and works cited page entries is an important aspect of avoiding plagiarism, and plagiarism is a serious offense in college. One instance of plagiarism can lead to a failing grade on a paper, a failing grade in a course, or even college disciplinary action. It's very important to learn how to document well to avoid running into serious problems in other courses. As we will note when studying MLA documentation, there are very specific formats that must be used in constructing both in-text citations and works cited entries. Fortunately, the rules and examples are available in our text and will be available for free throughout our lives through the Purdue Online Writing Lab. Now, documentation formats are very nitpicky, but using them is not rocket science. All we need to do is determine what type of source we're using. A chapter from a book, a work from an anthology, a newspaper article, a website, a documentary, and so forth. Then we just look up the format for that type of source in our textbook or on the Purdue OWL and copy the formatting exactly. We use capital letters in the same way they are used in the example. If a period is used in a certain spot in the example, we use a period in that spot in our entry. If a comma is used in a spot in the example, we use a comma there in our entry. If the example uses italics, we use italics. We just copy the style. Now, I'm constantly confused by students who cannot use documentation styles correctly. They seem to have no problems copying information word from sources, even though they should never do that. So I know they know how to copy. But they can't seem to copy the format demonstrated in examples of how to document. Now, if any of you could explain to me why students can copy just fine when they aren't supposed to and can't copy when they are supposed to, I'd be really interested in hearing that explanation. Now, although documentation is nitpicky, it's very important to learn to use it correctly. I've heard of professors who deduct a point for every character that is formatted incorrectly in bibliography entries, which means that otherwise good papers could actually earn negative scores. While I believe that is excessive, it's important to learn to use documentation very well in case you run into a professor who is that picky. Let's turn now to some of the writing skills we will develop while working on paper 3. The skills we learned in writing papers 1 and 2 will continue to be important, and we will work on improving our ability to use them. Although we will not submit idea-generating pre-writing, we will continue to use pre-writing techniques to plan, develop, and revise. We will submit a scratch outline that will name our main points and indicate at least one source we plan to use to develop each point. We also will work on writing a good thesis statement, and we will work on wording and use of high style to write formal academic papers. As we've discussed, locating and evaluating sources for reliability is an important part of writing research-driven papers, and we will spend considerable time learning to do so. Although research-driven papers are driven by and developed with information from sources, direct quotes are very rare. Instead, we use summary and paraphrase to put the information we gather from sources into our own words, and we will learn how to do that while working on paper 3. Now, there are several documentation styles that are used in college, and to some degree, which style is used depends on the discipline. While MLA is usually used in the arts and humanities, other disciplines use APA, Chicago Manual of Style, or other documentation formats. Fortunately, all documentation formats rely on looking up rules and examples of how to document a source and then copying the format exactly. So the skills we will learn in using MLA will be easy to transfer when using other documentation styles. One aspect of documentation is the bibliography, which in MLA is called the works cited page. The formats of the works cited entry for each source depends on the type of source we are incorporating, and it varies widely depending on the type of source. It is important when we study our materials on how to format sources to notice the different types of sources that require different formats. No one can remember all the variations in formats, but if we are at least familiar with which types of sources require specific formats, we'll know when and where to look for rules and examples. In addition to the works cited entries, we must use in-text documentation in the body of our paper to identify which information came from which sources. In-text documentation is designed to convey this information as simply as possible so that it doesn't interfere with our readers' focus on the information in the paper. The purpose is mainly to direct readers to more complete information on the bibliography so that they can read more about that specific point if they wish. Since in-text citations mainly are used to point to works cited entries, MLA in-text citations use the first item in the works cited entry, which is usually the author's name or names. If there is no author, the in-text citation uses a shortened form of the title, which will be the first item in the works cited entry. A reader should be able to find the specific works cited entry by just scanning the left margin of the works cited page. In addition, MLA uses page numbers in in-text citations if the source has pages. Not only must the works cited entries be formatted correctly, the works cited page also must meet format requirements. By the way, one of the requirements is that entries must be alphabetized, which makes it even easier for readers to find the source referred to by in-text citations. Now, if this information on using MLA documentation seems a little confusing, don't worry. We're going to spend considerable time while working on paper 3 studying how to use documentation. But I wanted to hit some of the most important points in this video so that you'll know what's coming up. That wraps up our introduction to paper 3, and I hope it helps you understand what is important in this unit and why. While we are building on skills we learned while working on papers 1 and 2, we will learn a number of very important new skills while working on paper 3. Remember, this is the most important unit in the course, and it is important to learn the skills we will study so that you can write papers for other courses. Of course, if you have any questions about this video or about anything in the course, all you need to do is email me through Canvas. We're going to be covering a great deal of material while working on paper 3, and some of it's complicated. I will be here to help you every step of the way. All you need to do is let me know that you need help by emailing me through Canvas. Thank you so much for studying this video. I hope it helps guide you through the work ahead.